Welcome to this week's episode of The Capitalist Investor. We have, as always, Diamond Hands D, Tony the Tiger, me, Colehan Luke, and we've got Mike Hudzinski, who appeared for the first time on our last podcast, a client of ours, and also a patent attorney by trade. Thanks for joining us again. Looking forward to digging a little bit deeper. Like last time we talked about AI. This time we're talking about more of the job market. I know we appreciate you always tuning in to, Mark Tepper's nice Fox appearances, and I know you listen to podcasts every week. Obviously, a big thing we talk about is jobs. I think you got a couple things to say on that, don't you? So let's start off by kind of just asking the table. 25% or more of public or jobs created right now are public sector jobs. I think the other 25% are like healthcare. So all the jobs basically being created are in public sector or the healthcare space, and healthcare is a big kind of getting a lot of money from the public sector and through grants and things like that to grow. Is the whole entire world just going to be run by the government down the road?
No, it's the administration gets in, and the next one that doesn't like it will start trimming, right?
I don't know. It seems like the path we're on has happened before in history, where governments get too big and they start outsourcing the entire job market.
If we get rid of 2 regulations for every one we implement in the next administration, we might be heading in the right direction.
Do you think that's going to happen, though?
Yes.
I hope. I don't know. I kind of talked about it before. Like right now, the stock market, let's throw out this stat. Intra-year drawdowns, top to bottom in the stock market, on a 6 or 7% correction, prices an incumbent wins. 17% drawdown, top to bottom in the stock market, prices the incumbent loses. So far this year, we've only seen a 5 or 6% drawdown in the stock market, pricing in a Biden victory. Is that being held up, though, by AI, government printing? Is that being held up by the Federal Reserve? And what's interesting is I think that's important to pay attention to, because are we going to get some of the policy? Like, is the likelihood of Trump winning there? I don't know.
I say yes.
I say yes. I say yes also. But what about just the stock market overall? What is the width of growth in the stock market? I thought it was just a few handful of stocks carrying the day. So I might not draw down if I'm not in that small basket of stocks that is really performing well right now, carrying the day. When you say the stock market in general is up, it's not everything that's up. So I might not draw down because I'm just not smart enough to be in NVIDIA.
Well, let's talk about that. I mean, because one thing we talked about is you're not paying attention every single day. That's why right. you hired us. You're working with us.
That's right.
Because we are paying attention to it. Sadly, every single day. That's why I don't sleep at night. But with that being said, not many people think like that. Most people just look at what's on TV. Right. And say, oh, well, they're saying the S&P's up 10% this year, 12%, whatever it be, and that's all they're paying attention to.
Right.
When it's 4 stocks, like you said, carrying the whole entire market, like 30% of it.
I mean, all right, so the equal weight S&P 500, everything's equal, right, is up 3 almost 4% year to date. The S&P 500 on equal weight, just the SPY, is up like 15 plus or minus % right now. Yeah, there's a huge disconnect.
Right.
And it is a couple stocks carrying this thing, and Tesla's fallen off the map. So you got like 4 stocks or 5 stocks carrying this thing forward.
That's right.
But my thing is, and my personal opinion, when you spend $1 trillion in the first 100 days of the year, right. It can float a lot of things for a long period of time. So there will the one thing that will not affect Biden's reelection is the economy. Everyone's gonna be like, "Oh, inflation." Yeah, I get it, but everyone still has jobs, and that is going to be the one thing that is a non-topic.
Well, but see, when you said everyone still has jobs, I was just looking at some of the layoffs last year, and there are hundreds of thousands of tech layoffs last year, and those were real private sector jobs, and so I'm not sure everybody has jobs.
Do you work with like governments to file patents? Like, can a government file a patent, like for government jobs? That's an interesting question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to catch you off guard.
Yes. So, for instance, the Department of the Navy has patents. Army has patents. They do collaborative work with vendors of research and development.
Right.
And so, the Army, Navy, all those services do actually hold patent rights.
My uncle was a aeronautical engineer.
Yeah, right.
He basically built like landing gear for F-15s.
Cool, yeah.
20 years ago, 30 years ago. He's got thousands of patents under his name.
Right.
He worked for, B.F. Goodrich and the vendors part, right?
That's right.
So, but at the end of the day, like those planes belong to the government, and I'm sure there's some type of IP that says you can't obviously share this stuff because it's patented, but that's got to work in some kind of detail like that. At the end of the day, the government owns that patent, even though it was written by my uncle who doesn't work for the government, right?
Well, so the government owns it because they bought it and paid for it, and
Correct.
they hired a smart person to invent on their behalf,
Right.
as an employee. So
Right, 1099, right? 1099 guy, go build this for me. Smart 1099 guy.
I mean, I don't see that as being. That's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most employees have an obligation to assign the patent rights to their.
Right. But if that's the case, if technically the government can own innovation and the government continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger, can't you expect that more and more jobs just continue to get created within the public sector? Because if the public sector grows, the technology then is owned by the government.
But all the
and people
ideas
are
come from the private sector.
Right. But eventually, if 50% plus of jobs being created is the government, does the private sector even exist
but
anymore?
the more, in my opinion, the more brilliant people are entrepreneurs.
I agree.
That will create whatever. Maybe the government buys them or whatever, but I don't know.
I don't disagree with you. That's my concern, is that the government just continues to take more and more market share. That's my point with that.
Until there's no more market. I mean, they
Right.
consume what supports them in the first place.
Yep.
It seems to me. It's like a snake eating its own tail, right?
Correct.
At some point. I don't know.
I think we're already there.
I think a lot of things right now are artificially being propped up. Could be jobs. There's a lot of money that is being spent right now. $1 trillion. That will float us for a while, and maybe those jobs don't exist next year because it was a front to make sure we just get through this election from the current administration. It could be.
And the $1 trillion is just money floating around in the system. It needs somewhere to go, right?
Exactly.
And so
and it can just float little things and get people jobs and stuff. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like, hey, we're gonna start building buildings and roads and bridges and infrastructure bills. It's like across everything.
So at some point, there's legitimate jobs and then there's make work.
Correct.
It seems to me that
Mm-hmm.
it's wise to invest in legitimate jobs, bridge building, and certain governmental functions that are necessary. It seems to me for.
But once that bridge is built, then what? What's next? Right? Is that job temporary?
Well, when does a government job ever go away? Is kind of right? I mean
That's the concern.
that's the concern, and then those people also retire, and somebody has to float that retirement.
Oh, I was going through TSA earlier this week, and some guy was bragging that he's going to retire like at 49 with a fat pension.
Yeah.
He's like, I love what I do because I know in 20 years I'll have this like $80,000 a year pension and live the rest of my life. That's coming from us, the taxpayers.
And that's a fixed benefit pension. It's not that you have a lump sum when you retire and then you have to kind of manage it. It's a fixed benefit going forward, adjusted for cost of living. It's in perpetuity.
So the last 5 years, the market is up over 100% or something. It's everyone's accounts are up, right? And that propelled the baby boomers to retire.
Okay.
But they're baby boomers. The next generations were not having as many kids.
Right.
And when these people start retiring, I think there will always be a job market for people to work. It depends on what you want to do, because there's more people retiring than people being born.
That's a Ponzi scheme.
Ah!
That's I talk about all the time. But the economy is a Ponzi scheme. So if that's the case, you can't have economic growth.
Correct.
What do you think about
and
that?
that's why like they're letting illegal immigrants come in. We need workers. I mean, that's one of their angles on why they're letting this happen.
It's kind of, well, yeah, it's.
Yeah,
more,
that's another rabbit hole.
Well, yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole.
That's a whole
but
nother
that
rabbit
is
hole.
true. That is true. That's filling the void right now. But still, population collapse is a big issue. Because yes, there will be jobs that exist. Is the bigger issue at play not that jobs being created from the government, but jobs just aren't going to be able to get filled to produce? I mean, is that a bigger issue?
I think so.
Yeah.
I honestly,
that is the issue.
I feel like that will eventually be a real thing.
Sounds like it's an employees market.
Yeah,
It could be
Better be taking
it
care
could
of
be,
me.
It could be for a long time. So maybe like my last comment on the other podcast was like, is technology going to create job disruption? Maybe it's just filling the voids of jobs that people don't want to do or not qualified to do because no one wants to go to school and work anymore either. So again, another rabbit hole of conspiracy theories, but I don't know. I think it's a very interesting.
Well, let's take a look at this. On the next episode, we're talking about some electric vehicles in that space. And what's interesting is talking about jobs with EVs. You take a look at states like Michigan. Michigan is basically run by the auto manufacturers, Ford, GM, Stellantis, which I believe used to be Chrysler, and those kind of names. Traditional gas vehicles had a lot more parts to them. They took a lot more people to manufacture those parts and had a lot of jobs. This push towards EVs takes a lot less parts and takes a lot less employees. So it's like technology is innovating to the point where you can use the EV space as an example of that, to where jobs are just being displaced, and that goes back to what we were just talking about. So we'll hit on more about what that looks like from the tech space and the patent space, what Mike's seeing over there on the next episode. But I just wanted to bring that up because it kind of does relate to the job market as technology grows and gets better. It is displacing jobs. And the question is it going to create new jobs? And I think we are close to a point where it's not creating new jobs, whether it's EVs or whether it's AI. So anyway, thank you for everybody for listening to this podcast of The Capitalist Investor. Tune in here in a couple days for our next podcast, and we'll see you then. The opinions expressed in the podcast are for general informational purposes only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any investment, legal, financial, or tax strategy. It is only intended to provide education about the financial industry. Please consult a qualified professional about your individual needs.